What's up, guys? Alright, this one's going to be for Manuel? Why can't people with easy names like Bob or Nick or Tom or Sam? Oh, it's always somebody with a almost complicated name that asks for something. So anyways, this one's for Manuel, I'm not sure which way it's pronounced. When you're doing your suspension, and I'm going to probably focus on the front, you've got a few things. I know you said you're getting click-based instructions, more or less. There's an easier way to do it, and I'll give you, I think, what's more or less the guiding measurements for 954. So we are going to stick the camera archer. You have compression, preload, and rebound. They're all three set different ways. Your preload is probably the hardest to set, and you need more than one person to do this. Your best thing to do is get your bike on a rear stand, get your bike on a front stand. You want to measure from a static point, preferably in line with the axis of your suspension. Okay, so something like, if I want to go from something like the center of this bolt to the center of this bolt. What you're looking for is to measure the amount of drop that you get in your suspension. So with the bike fully unloaded, you want to take a measurement from, again, just wherever you feel comfortable, but you want to do the same point regardless. Go from like here to here, okay? Measure what that distance is, then get the bike back on the ground, fully, loaded back into the suspension. Give it a few bounces, make sure it settles. You want that is your static sag. You want that to be somewhere around 10 millimeters. Then you have what's called a rider sag. That is exactly how it sounds. You fully geared up, in riding trim, are basically going to have your bike upright, get your full weight on the suspension. And if you have a shed like mine, I can grab onto a rail or whatever up here and hold myself up. But once you're on the bike, what you want to do, give it a couple bounces, get it to settle, and you want to measure that same point to the same point. And it's basically, your measurement of your static sag, and you want to see how far it moved to do your rider sag. So when you're on it, rule of thumb, 30 to 35 millimeters. That is your preload. Compression and rebound. You did mention that you couldn't tell, or you thought they were uneven. I know they do split functions now on a lot of newer bikes, or some of the newer bikes. Telling which fork is off or if they're not even is very, very hard to do, but I can give you a couple tips to get them even. So on the 954, if I turn this, that's my compression, it's not necessarily going to click. And I don't go by clicks, because if it doesn't click, or you don't feel the click, or you don't hear the click, it's going to be off. Instead, go by turns. So when you're going compression and rebound, you want to go by turns, not clicks. The reason is it's easier to measure. You can see the line of where that goes. Your standard starting point is roughly 2.5 turns out on your compression. So you want to go from wherever it seats. Don't twist it hard, just let it seat. And then you want to go same point. Half. 1, half, 2. Okay, so I'm 2 turns out. It's about where I was to begin with. That's the easiest way to do it. But that also means you need to make sure your other side matches. Okay, so your other side, again, you just want to seat it lightly. So let's go. Half, 1, half, 2. You see my zip tie. The zip tie is there for a reason. Anytime I adjust my suspension, what I'll do is I'll take that zip tie and I'll push it. Don't put it on tight. You push it all the way up. And then what this will do is, as you brake hard, this will get pushed down further and further and further and further. It is going to hit a certain point where it stops. You want to be somewhere in that bottom third, but not bottomed out. About there is about my maximum I want it to hit. You don't want to bottom out. That's going to cause all sorts of issues. But you want as much suspension travel as you can get. The softer you go, or the further out you go, the further down this will travel. You don't want to do this and then just go on a very normal ride, and if it's way up here, adjust it softer. Get some really hard, like almost emergency braking, or safely emergency braking. Make sure it's not going to go all the way down. Biggest advice I can give you. So 2 turns out, compression and rebound. Compression on both sides. I know my compression's the same. Rebound is up here. Your preload, by the way, your preload is using this right here. This one actually has the adjuster. That one I'm missing it, and this one I'm thinking about pulling off because it looks pretty bad. I want to replace these with new ones, make them look pretty. Rebound's right here. And that is how fast the bike's going to come back up. The best way to do it is to compress it, and you want your rebound to come back up within 1 second, but you don't want it to come back up so hard that it like bounces. Does that make sense? And it's the same deal on turns. The difference is, hopefully that will focus, you can see there's a little dot right there. So if I dial it in, 4 turns. Okay, so I actually have my rebound at 4 turns out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, this could be different. I have different spring rates. I have actually changed the springs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Should have been about right there. Harder preload, which means it's going to sag less with either static or you on the bike, is right. Right is hard, left is soft. So if you do your static sag and it's 5 millimeters, you want to go softer. Both sides, even amounts all the time. And on these, you pretty much have to use your ratchet or your wrench or whatever you're using to adjust your preload. Draw a line on the socket or whatever, and a line on, or start at a point on here to where you can track how many turns out you go. Small increments, both sides evenly, and then check your static sag and your rider sag. Your rebound, like I said, you want it to come up within a second, but not bounce hard. If it bounces too hard, that just causes issues later on. So if it's set too stiff, go out. Even on your rebound, same thing. If it's too stiff, dial it out. So if it's coming up too fast, dial it out a hair bit. If it's coming up too slow, or it's not fully rebounded in a second or so, dial it up a little bit harder. I think the general rule of thumb starting out on your compression is 2 to 2.5 turns out, or about 2.5 turns out usually. Your rebound is generally somewhere around 3, and your sag you just have to set. There's no easy way around that. Okay, so let's look at the shock. This is backwards. This is your compression, your rebound's on the bottom. Okay, and it's the exact same deal. Hard going to the right, soft going to the left. Right here you need the special little spanner to really grab onto these. Again, fixed point. Now here's the hard part on the back. When you're doing your sag on the back, you cannot use a swing arm lift. I can't use, like my spools that I have, I can't use a swing arm lift, whether it's underneath or spool stand, to do this, because you need all the weight off the back suspension. If you have your stock footrest, like your brackets for your footrests, I've seen people suspend it from the ceiling to get the initial measurement. And then again, you can go from like that bolt to the middle of that bolt. And you want to check your static sag and your rider sag. That's going to be adjusted here. Same deal. If you're turning it to the right, it's going to harden up. To the left, it's going to soften up. I don't even remember where my settings are on this. Like I said, backwards. Your compression's on top, your rebound's on the bottom, and it's going to be right here. If you can see that, I would say kind of rule of thumb, probably about the same. Do about 2.5 out on your compression and your rebound, and then push down, let it pop all the way back up. It should be within 1 second, but not so fast that your freaking back tire is bouncing off the ground. That's pretty much it. That will give you a good starting point. The zip tie thing works out perfectly because you can adjust your compression for 2 things. You can get it basically as soft as you need it before you bottom out. You do not want to bottom out. That is one of the ways you get back tire lifting under heavy braking, is bottoming out. And then if it's too stiff, you'll get the exact same problem. It can't compress enough and you'll end up lifting the back tire. It's good for stoppies though. Hopefully that explains enough to where you can get your suspension set. Suspension is one of those black arts that some guys master and some guys pay somebody to do. I do my own. It takes a lot of fiddling with it. Always write down your settings before you change anything so you can go back to what you were at if you screw something up. Play with it a little bit. Get something that feels right to you, but adjust it. Go for a slightly spirited ride. Figure out if it works for you. If it's compressing too much, if it's not compressing enough, adjust it accordingly. Go out and retest. That is That is the biggest thing on suspensions. Even MotoGP guys, with all the data that they get from their bikes, it still comes down to what the rider thinks. Hopefully that clears up your questions, or your suspension woes. By the way, you should be rebuilding your forks about every 20,000 miles. I'm getting close to where I need to redo mine again. Any questions or any other questions, let me know. Hopefully that'll help you. Be safe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.